Good morning. It's a great pleasure and honor to be with you. Excellencies, ministers, and ambassadors. Mr. Yaakov Katz, the editor, it's really great being here. I would like to say that for me, as maybe one of the youngest politicians that deals with foreign policy, most of my adult life were under the peace process. And when I see how history goes, I can tell you that 3 American presidents and 6 secretaries of state made dramatic efforts in order to find solution to this Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They all came back to Washington with empty hands. And the big question, of course, is why? So I have a story to tell you. One of my friends were in one of the most private meetings where a new Secretary of State, I won't say his name, got into his position in Washington, and he asked them, "What makes you believe that you will succeed where all the others failed?" And what he said, in the most optimistic way, was, "The reason we'll succeed is we missed the deep stream that made the Israeli-Palestinian conflict something that is not solved just by drawing the border." So today I would like to speak about those 2 things, and I'll let you questions to think about, because it's just 10-minute speak. And I really hope that the discussion that will be followed by other leaders will lead us to a new paradigm of thinking. Well, the first thing and the first myth that I would like to put on this table is the myth of occupation. For many years, this was the main issue. Occupation is the reason why peace is not reached in the Middle East. Well, after 2005, it's very easy to speak about how much it doesn't reflect reality. There is no occupation in Gaza. There is not even one Israeli soldier. Of course, Israel has the right to defend itself, but this is not under Israeli occupation. And of course, there are not settlements in Gaza, because in 2005, Israel committed a disengagement. And for all of the people that promised us that Gaza will become an international Singapore, well, I visited Singapore, maybe some of you did, doesn't look anything like Singapore. And the reason is because this is not about occupation. This is about the values that a society that lives in Gaza believes in. And because Gaza was taken control by a terror organization, eventually we saw peace getting farther and farther and farther. The second problem with using the term of occupation is actually from the Palestinian side. If you ask a Palestinian leader, what does he mean by using the term occupation? Well, he means only one thing: 1948. This is the formative experience for the Palestinian people, the establishment of the State of Israel. So when they say occupation, they don't regard to 1967 like most international community does. They regard the Nakba, the disaster of the creation of the State of Israel. So it doesn't reflect even a Palestinian paradigm of the word occupation. When you say occupation, you think about 1967. It's irrelevant year in the history and the narrative of the Palestinian people. Let's go back to the Jewish history. People are trying to deny our right to be in Judea and Samaria. Well, I think that if you know history and you're not reading Palestinian history books, because in the Palestinian history books, even the Temple Mount is not a Jewish place, then you must know that according to the history, 3,000 and 4,000 years, Jewish communities were in Hebron and Jerusalem. Bet El, Shiloh, all those places are the places where the Jewish history began. And when people are speaking about our right to live in Tel Aviv, well, it's absurd. No Jew can live in Tel Aviv if he doesn't have the deep connection to Judea, Samaria, and Jerusalem. This is why the term occupation is legally wrong, but historically wrong as well. And we need to break this paradigm. We need to start speaking about a new way of thinking about the fact that Jews should live in their homeland. And I think the Prime Minister was regarding that by saying that transferring Jews is an ethnic cleansing. I think it was very difficult to some people to hear that, but this is the truth. You can't transfer people. This is something that is absolutely abolishment of human rights, but it's okay when it's coming to Jews. Well, I guess most of you feel uncomfortable. The truth is, every future solution should include Judea and Samaria under Israel's sovereignty, because this is the Jewish homeland. I want to move to the second point. And the second point is something that the international community doesn't pay enough attention to. It's education. Yes, this word that needs a long-term investment. For many years, we invested in economy. $22 billion were invested in the Palestinian Authority from international money that came from Europe and from America. Where did all this money went to? Do they have a good economic system? Do they have a good educational system? Well, you know the answer. And I can tell you in a very simple way. Society that educates its children, its young children, by the spirit of culture of hate, on a denial of the right of my children to exist, is a society that in the long term won't produce anything positive to the humankind. Israeli children are being raised on the idea that one day they'll be able to reach a startup company, a Nobel Prize. 12 Israelis got Nobel Prizes since this young country was established in 1948. But for the Palestinian child, this is not an option, but not because what you think. The reason that it's not an option, because the dream is to see them going back to Yafo, Akko, Lod, Ramle, all those places in the Green Line. Let me translate, which means that Israel won't exist. Now, for many years, people said education is impossible. Well, it was definitely possible on two great examples. Japan and Germany, after the World War. The Second World War, the United States took it as a challenge to bring democratic values to those two countries. And it's a great success, which means that when the international community is together putting all its efforts on education, it's possible. The thing that made me, more than anything, sad about the future of the Palestinian children is the fact that the last intifada, we called it the children's intifada. We saw children, young children, girls and boys, taking kitchen knives and stabbing children in their bed. This is something that, if you have children, you can't tolerate. You can't imagine your children doing the same thing. And if you want to fight that, you need to fight that by education, by monitoring textbooks, by monitoring I would say, the environment, the educational environment that those children are being raised in. And I think it's possible. For many years, we saw monitoring of those textbooks and even sponsoring the textbooks. But most of the textbooks today, and this is the former research from 2006 till 2016, it shows that the delegitimation of the State of Israel is still the most dominant value in those books. No Israeli child denies the right of a Palestinian child to live, to have human rights. They deny our right to exist as a Jewish state. And I think that this is the long-term solution that can solve, I would say, the future for the two countries. It was neglected because some people still believe it's all about borderlines. And I want to say, after over 20 years of trying to draw the borderline, this is not about borderline. So if we'll break this paradigm of occupation, if we'll speak about the future of the young generation, we might going to see a young child in the Palestinian Authority that is growing to be Anwar Sadat. But all we see at the moment is more and more extremist. All we see at the moment is the leader of the Palestinian people teaching those children that all the holy places to the Jewish religion are converting themselves to be a Muslim sites. We saw that in UNESCO. And let me tell you something, you might gonna laugh, but it goes to the place of the extreme, almost a grotesque. Some of those people are speaking about Tel Aviv as Tel Arbiya. There was never a place called Tel Arbiya, but they're reinventing history. This is part of the words game. And they're saying to their children, and it's written in some maps, that Tel Aviv was built on the Arab city Tel Arbiya, something that was never there. And I think that if you falsify history and you grow your children on the denial of the other side, you can't reach permanent peace. And this is where we should go to education and having a very clear notice that even if it's going to take 20 years from now, it's definitely going to be better than the 20 years we had of just putting programs on the table, ignoring the Middle East falling apart, ignoring the radicalism all around us, and just hoping for good. Gaza is a good experiment that shows when you want a better future to the Palestinians, the last thing you need is to throw the keys of the responsibility to the sea. We don't want to do that in Judea and Samaria. We don't want to see our neighbors growing another generation of hate. This is why I have enough patience to believe that 20 years from now, if the international community will put all its efforts on education, we'll find ourselves in a better place and definitely with a much better Middle East. Thank you.